from the original Sports Illustrated article. This guy, I'm not even trying to say that last name, but he was a handyman. He was friends with Rose, and he said he'd go in and watch him in the house, and he'd have like 4 TVs set up. And this is on like flat screen TV days, right?
Sure.
And he said he was keeping track of all these bets, and he was amazed how he could do it. But he said Pete would bet on anything with anybody who was in the room. He would bet on a coin toss. Yeah. He would bet on who would score the most points in the first half. I remember reading somebody else said if it was like rock tosses, he'd have a backyard full of rocks.
Well, listen,
so that's his personality.
Yeah, well, we did a pod, right? We talked about it on drugs and fentanyl. Yeah.
This is a compulsion. It's a compulsion. Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
Not a drug literally, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Right. But, my take on it is, and again, you look at, and you know me, I'm not the most sports knowledgeable person, but you take people, is it cheating, or is it something that he's doing that kind of tarnishes the spirit of the sport, or the reputation of the sport? What was he doing? If you can't prove he was betting, if he was doing something to cause his team to lose, then I guess you got to go with what he said, and he only bet on the game for them to win. You take other people that have taken performance-enhancing drugs.
Sure.
Cork the bats. Remember, was it Phil Nico or the one with the sandpaper in the back pocket?
And Clemens,
the pine tar,
McGuire. So, and they're keeping all those guys out of the Hall of Fame, too. So baseball's kind of a different animal.
But again, if you're doing something to get that edge, you're taking a performance-enhancing sport, you got to look at the numbers and say, hey, was there ever a time that it's legit, or were you cheating the whole time? Now, can you say that with Pete Rose because you can't say he didn't bet against? But I think there's a difference there.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a difference in performance enhancing to Pete Rose as a player, because nothing he didn't do anything enhancing as a player.
Correct.
He's out of the Hall of Fame because of his banishment for gambling, what we just talked about.
Right.
So, and I think the biggest thing with the gambling is what we just talked about, the integrity. Gambling is such a big business, especially today. And if there's any thought that something is not on the up and up, these leagues are going to come down with the utmost punishment,
Okay, and again, these thoughts pop into my head as we're talking. It's almost like a warning tale to younger athletes, people that are looking, somebody like yourself, you had such a storied career in college football. You look at these young kids, it's like your outside life affects everything too. You understand how you carry yourself outside of the sport affects a lot. Yeah,
there's a lot that goes into it.
Sure, but he had so many accomplishments. So you read these articles and everything. You look at all the people. He kept really bad company. He would work out at this Gold's Gym, and he would hang out with these guys that were bodybuilders, and they were selling steroids, and they were taking, they were putting bets down for him, and just not positive characters.
Not very savory.
And it's like, do you want to put somebody like that? Does it tarnish his
accomplishments
on the field?
And I think the sports writers who ultimately put you in the Baseball Hall of Fame, they take that all into consideration.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean that's the it's the never ending discussion. You have people put him in, not put him in. So obviously what he did was wrong. I'm not saying it wasn't. Clearly was.
There's consequences to your actions.
Yeah, absolutely. But we move on, and then so the other one I just wanted to touch on quickly, because we can go forever on just one of these topics, is the Chicago White Sox scandal, which is called the Black Sox scandal, right? Where famous movie 8 Men Out, which I've actually never seen.
I have never seen it either, believe it or not. Yeah,
but they were accused of 8 players accused of throwing the 1919 World Series against, oddly, the Cincinnati Reds. Pete Rose was not around then, so don't worry about it. And this case actually forced baseball to have its first commissioner. And he was a judge, Landis, I believe his name is. Kennesaw Mountain Landis. That's a good name. Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis. Was appointed the first. What are you going to do?
These guys are mountain.
He was appointed the first commissioner of baseball over this. So obviously the big name in there is Shoeless Joe Jackson. And so doing the research on it, and I never really did, apparently to a grand jury, because this all went in front of a grand jury. Mm-hmm. They indicted, of course, which you can indict a grand ham sandwich. It goes to a jury. I guess there was statements in there to the grand jury that Shoeless Joe Jackson said he took $5,000, but he never met any of the gamblers. And then if you look at his numbers, I got them written down here. I mean, he played, his numbers were just unbelievable in the World Series. I have them right here. So he led the series in batting, 375 batting average, had the only home run, threw out a bunch of base runners, had no errors. But But there were some allegations that on hits to him in the outfield that he kind of maybe slow walked him a little bit. Didn't throw the ball back as good as he could have.
Right.
There was a high number of triples in that World Series. But at the end of the day, I went to trial, and all 8 of them were found not guilty. The 8 players.
Okay.
But there's all kinds of statements from them that they did take some money. So there's obviously a lot of stuff going on there.
What was the?
They too are all banned from baseball. They're not getting in the Hall of Fame either.
What was the trial? The trial was basically on like what were they even charged with? Do you know?
Yeah, well,
I probably should have done my research too on it, but
let me see if they have actually the charge, because
I'm sure if we watched the movie.
Yeah, it's just basically corruption.
Okay.
So they were indicted on corruption charges, and that they, conspired these 8 players to throw the World Series.
And see, like something like that, I wonder, because you're saying they got acquitted, and I'm sitting there wondering, like, if they're admitting to taking this money and everything, is it something where like the jury is kind of like starstruck, and like they're like, this Shoeless Joe Jackson guy was like a hero.
And the trial was
do you want to
1921,
and $5,000 in 1921? What would that even equate to nowadays? It'd probably be a lot more.
Yeah, a lot of money, a good amount of money. I think it's actually in my notes somewhere. But yeah, so all these players, I guess they were able to show that they had taken some money and, obviously affiliated with gamblers. And so a lot going on. But I just thought that it was interesting that the criminal justice system obviously came in on this one.
Right.
But I'm with you back then. And I think in my research, I think there was some jury tampering in the beginning. It delayed the trial and they got people on. So at the end of the day, who the heck knows?
World Series tampering, jury tampering.
But
why
it
not?
goes to show you, even from back then, gambling was an issue, and that that again started a baseball commissioner and has banned people from baseball.
Sure.
So all the way back to 1919, you have people banned from baseball. So interesting. So I wanted to jump into football.
Okay.
And I thought this was interesting because I never knew this, and I'm sure there's going to be people listening to this never knew this. So we just talked about Pete Rose, right?
Right.
Banned for life, not in the Hall of Fame for gambling on the Reds and gambling on his sport. So I did not know this at all. So in 1963, a couple All-Pros in football, Paul Hornung and Alex Karras, were suspended.
Okay.
Which I didn't know. For the entire season, Pete Rozelle was the commissioner. Obviously, Paul Hornung, great halfback, tailback for the Green Bay Packers. Alex Karras was a defensive tackle for the Detroit Lions, and they were suspended for the entire 1963 season for betting on NFL games and quote unquote associating with known hoodlums.
Okay.
And then and so that's a big deal too. So and Paul Hornung was the league MVP in '61. And
so
I guess
about 2 years later,
Roselle's investigation said he bet as much as $500 on games from 59 to 61. Karras made about 6 bets ranging from $50 to $100.
Right.
$5K back then. $500 back then. I think it was about $5K today.
Okay.
It's tough with inflation. Who the hell knows what money's worth today?
40%.
But here's the thing. So it said for a couple of years span that they bet on football. Okay. So then they suspended them all of 63, and then in 64 they were reinstated. Came back.
Okay, so they got 1 year suspension.
And they're both
right
in the Pro Football Hall of Fame today. Both Paul Hornung and Alex Karras. So they kind of weathered the storm. Now, from what I could research, like Paul Hornung never admitted to gambling.
Okay.
But never denied it. Just was like, not to say anything. I'll take my punishment. And he was out a year, and that's it. So I just thought it was interesting because those were high. I didn't really get into how they caught them.
I was going to say, that's always with all these cases that we've looked at, my question is always like, how do these people get caught, I guess,
from what I can see with gambling is like someone else gets caught doing something else or gambling on something else. And they flip. It's all right. Yeah. I mean, come on, we've seen it. Not necessarily in gambling, but it's always someone flipping. A scorned lover. Like you see it.
With going back to again, I don't want to go back, but the Pete Rose one, that was my main question. Yeah, was how did he get caught? Because it's like there was like rumors surrounding it, and I guess
you answered your own question though. when you're a gambler to that level and you gamble on everything. You end up associating yourself with one person. That's not a closet gambler that has an addiction, that has like a great uncle that he trusts with his life.
Yeah, no.
And that uncle does all the bets, and that's all it is, and it's really quiet, hush hush. They can't separate. It's like it's their world. It's nuts, you know. And I'm sure, I don't know this, and I'm not saying, I'm sure he's a big card player, right? I mean,
Pete Rose, what I got, he liked to go play go to the track.
Off track,
He liked to play the horse.
OTB,
No,
I know.
he actually went to the
but
track.
I know,
yeah.
I have sources.
Yeah, the OTB.
He did a lot of OTB stuff. I don't even think there's OTB around.
Well, no, the
anymore,
OTB was the two dudes that he was calling in and saying, "Hey, go put the bets down for me."
But I thought it was interesting that Paul Hornung,
Yes.
a NFL MVP, was suspended for an entire year, allegedly accused of gambling on football.
Right.
Not his team, not like that, but still your sport. Gets a year's suspension, comes back, and makes it into the Hall of Fame. So
I wonder if it's okay. So he doesn't admit to it. So there's allegations. So you
I
suspend
don't believe he did. I mean, I'm sure someone will be like, "Oh, there was
Well,
a, there
let
was
us
a
know if we're
book
wrong.
35." Yeah. Listen, that's the caveat with all of this.
Yeah, let us
if
know.
we miss something, just let us know. We're not.
Twitter would probably be the best place
So
to go comment on it.
that. So that brings us to the most recent one, the Calvin Ridley case, which is fascinating as well. So for those that don't know, Calvin Ridley, star wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons, played at Alabama. Okay, it was hurt this year. Last year was hurt. Okay, so he makes bets, and I mean, there's from different research. I mean, how many bets he made? Okay, but there's some investigations that went on. But what we know is he bet on football,
Right.
and he didn't try to hide it. Okay,
Right.
so he's a Fort Lauderdale native, South Florida. Seminole Hard Rock in Hollywood,
Yep.
which I went to for my anniversary
Right.
a month, 2 months ago. Beautiful place.
The Qatar Hotel?
Yes.
Okay.
So they had legalized sportsbook open.
Okay.
It's since been shut because there's people suing, and so now it's in the courts. But for the month that it was open and up and the app was working, Calvin Ridley made these bets.
Okay.
Didn't hide his name, didn't do anything like that. So it looks like from the investigation, he claimed, because Calvin Ridley came out on Twitter and said, "Listen, I bet $1,500. I don't have a gambling problem. I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have did it." Okay, because again, you can gamble on these sites.
Sure.
You just can't gamble on football, especially your own team.
Right. But
So-
that's according to like what, his contract or the rules? Or
No, that's
is
the
it
rules of the league.
Okay,
Again,
okay.
most of the leagues, the verbiage is a little different, but they're all the same. You can
Right.
gamble as long as it's legalized gambling and it's not on your sport. Okay. He says he gambled $1,500. I think the investigation showed he gambled a whopping $3,900 across 6 separate bets, which included the Falcons games.
But he's not playing at that point.
He's not. He's hurt. So the one that makes me laugh is he did apparently a $300 parlay. So if you don't know what a parlay is, it's like you combine a bunch of different things. You combine a bunch of different games, overs, unders, but you combine a bunch of different things.
yeah.
You have to hit on them all.
Right.
If you hit on them all, you'll win a substantial amount of money based on your bet. But you got to win them all. He did an 11-leg parlay. So that means you got to hit 11 things. I mean,
He did that.
yeah, the odds were 4. I mean, it says the odds were 481 to 1. I don't even think they were that good.
Right.
He didn't win it, obviously.
Oh, okay.
But I think the Falcons were in that one, and so I think Sports Illustrated did a more in-depth investigation, and it showed that he may have wagered a total of like $32,000, which to me and you is a lot of money. But here's the kicker. So here's the kicker. And again, he admitted he was wrong. The NFL. So getting back to what they did to Hornung and Karras, right? In 63, they suspend Ridley for the entire year. So I know you don't know this because you didn't look this up. Do you know what being suspended for so we talked about he gambled anywhere from a couple thousand to $30,000, let's say, right?
Right.
He's out the entire year. Did you look it up, jerk? I didn't want you to.
I don't know.
He's out the entire year next year.
Right.
Do you know what he's going to lose in salary? Because you don't get paid when you're suspended.
I know. No, I don't.
You don't really know?
No.
$11.1 million. So doing a few bets like that, it's costing him $11 million, which I think is, harsh. I'm under, yes, he gambled on football. To me, you got to look at the totality of circumstances.
Sure.
I always did this as a detective.
Right.
So I don't know what he was thinking. He wasn't trying to hide it.
No.
He wasn't using like a third-party person. He wasn't using a bookie under the
wasn't Pete
table.
Rosing it.
He used his name.
Right.
You know, I just don't know if he just honestly didn't know he couldn't.